I am a romance writer, actually, a romance novelist. Silver Skies is a romance, first and foremost, before any other category. It's called like a mainstream romance, kind of like the Thornbirds. And I'm going to explain how I approach writing a romance as a woman from a man's point of view. Yes, I'm writing a romance from mainly from the male point of view. I have three point of view characters. Dor Ben Habakkuk is my lead. He's a rabbi. And yes, what I'm writing is a romance. I have another male lead, Franz Wilhelm, a private investigator and a new ager. And he is a man, obviously. And then I have a female lead, Brianna Wilhelm. So I'm writing a romance novel from the point of view of three main characters, with the most important main character being a man, and then I have Brianna. So these are my stages. He doubts his manliness. He doubts his marriage. He finds his soulmate, who ends up not being his wife, who makes him feel like a man, and he learns that his wife is the Antichrist. So I go deep into his soul and the anguish he feels when he feels he's failed as a man. This is something that a lot of women don't understand about men. His wife is like a cancer who eats away at his soul. You know, it's really funny because as I've been studying the romance genre, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, and watching the Hallmark movies, I've noticed the main theme in a lot of romance stories is that the two lovers find out they're soulmates, that they belong to each other, but they don't figure it out till the end. And at the beginning, they think they're utterly incompatible. This is your typical working out of a romance in a Hallmark romance movie. My and that usually works, and it's usually presented mainly from the woman's point of view. Though they be in a movie, they go into the man's too. And as I was watching these movies, I was thinking that if they made a romance movie about me and Brent and made Laurie McBride the other woman, the way they'd work out the plot is they would show how utterly incompatible Brent Spiner is to Laurie McBride. They have totally different goals in life. Laurie is money and fame driven. She's a social justice warrior, and she doesn't really think very deeply about life. And she's shallow, and even worse than that, she's a sociopath. They'd have to make a horror movie if they made one about her and Brent. The real Brent is he's an INFJ type. I believe I got him pegged. He's an intuitive type. He feels things very deeply. He's a thinker. He's deep. He's philosophical, and he's not money driven. In fact, right now he does his doctor, he's a physician. He does his doctor services for free as a service to his community at Church of Gail. He is a pastor. But even before he became all these things, when he wasn't saved, when he wasn't a Christian, he was never a money driven person. He went into acting not for fame or money. In fact, that's why he started off as a theater actor, but because it was his passion. This was something he really believed in, he really enjoyed doing. Whereas the Brent Spiner clone is in fact, you couldn't get the real Brent Spiner, to go to Star Trek conventions in 1990 and 1991. He thought they were stupid. He didn't want to go. He's very private. He wanted to separate who he was as a real person from his persona on the stage. And I used to write him and say, I understand how you feel. I think people should respect your need for privacy, and they shouldn't criticize you because you feel uncomfortable going to Star Trek conventions. And this is where Brent Spiner is just totally different from his clone. And the clone just loves going to Star Trek conventions. On the other hand, Brent had to be talked into it. This because it goes against, he's a very private INFJ person. And anyways, so if they made a movie about Brent and Laurie, it would have to show that those two are utterly incompatible. Brent doesn't give a flip about fame. Laurie, that's all she cares about. She boasts about all her famous friends. She thinks that's the end all and be all of life, is to be a famous person and be associated with famous people and have your name up in lights, whereas Brent doesn't give a flip about any of that stuff. And the two are just utterly incompatible. Actually, I don't give a flip about any of that stuff. And that's why Brent and I understand each other. Brent and I are both humanitarians. We are very others oriented, whereas Lori is very selfish and self centered, as is her clone counterpart. So if they made a movie about those two, it would show that the Brent's soulmate is me. I'm the one who thinks and feels like he does. I'm the one who understands him. Lori McBride, when she found out that I forgave Brent for having Lori in his life because I figured out she was a Vatican agent, she couldn't comprehend this at all. She thought we were both crazy. She says, "How could she forgive you when I probably had sex with you?" She doesn't understand the concept of forgiveness, of true love, because she doesn't believe in it. And anyway, so, thinking about what makes a romance work is by showing that the true lovers, whether your lead is male or female, are soulmates. And usually at the beginning of the story, they don't realize this. And as the story progresses, they figure this out. So my main character doubts his manliness. He doubts his marriage. He finds his soulmate, who's not his wife, who makes him feel like a man. And he learns that his wife is the Antichrist. And I'm not going to tell you the fifth thing because it'll ruin the book for you. So I go deep into his soul and the anguish he feels when he's failed as a man. This is something that a lot of women don't understand about men. His wife's like a cancer who eats away at his soul. And at the time I wrote this, I was in a marriage to an evil man. He never read my writing because he was shallow and only cared about money and his reputation. So I just reversed roles and imagined the man as me and the woman in the marriage like my ex, except I brought up the manliness aspect, how my main character was plagued with feelings of doubt about his manliness. To help women understand how a man feels about his manliness, I have a lot of thought sections where he bears his soul. I'm half King David, so I can reach down into the manly side of me to write a story about a man because I understand men so well. Brent and I rarely have a disagreement. We're usually on the same page. When he's silent, I know he has a good reason. When he speaks, he's profound, and you know it's something he's thought deeply over. We give each other a lot of space and freedom. Lori doesn't give Brent any space and freedom. If he dares to try to be himself and go after the woman he truly loves, she will torment him. A red flag for me with any person is someone who won't give me space. I was raised by a narcissist and married to one. I can sniff out a narcissist now a mile away, and believe me, Lori McBride and the Brent Spiner clone are narcissists and sociopaths. I understand the narcissist so well. I made them the villains in my novel, and my main narcissist is female. And what's funny is when I created her, I didn't even know about Lori McBride, and the narcissist antagonist is a lot like Lori McBride. I'm not going to tell you number 5 in my stages of this story because it'll give away the ending. There's a lot of conflicts because of religious differences. Both leads have to violate their deepest convictions or obligations if they ever get together. They have to learn to differentiate between true convictions and a feeling of obligation and then not be intimidated into violating who they really are just because it may not be popular or acceptable. This isn't easy since the male's a rabbi and the female is a missionary. You might ask, what made you decide to write a love story from a man's point of view? It's because I so admired Brent Spiner. I wanted to create a character a lot like him so that the world would get to know an awesome man. And it's interesting that a lot of men have read what I've written thus far and they love this book. It changes them. Matthew McConaughey, who plays the lead in the movie version, says he fell in love with me after reading the book. I'm still researching for the last third, and I put in a tremendous amount of research for the first 2/3, and to match the good work I did in the first 2/3, I need to keep up the research. What's interesting is that the book is good, even if you're a female, because the male lead is very attractive and one that a good woman would want to get to know. My male readers tell me the book has changed their life. I had one very intelligent review from, she's dropping yeast bombs and my eyes are watering. I had one very intelligent review from a female reader though, but that review got taken down. Jesuits are relentless in trying to make me appear crazy. They say I write my own good book reviews, which is ridiculous. This is the book I had to write. I was so proud of Brent. I wanted to pattern my lead after him, and I know I'm breaking a lot of rules for a romance novel, but this is the story on my heart. I have a lot of sympathy for good men, especially nowadays when they're getting so much crap from Laurie McBride. The female lead goes through her own stages, and they aren't quite like how a typical romance novel works itself out. I had to weave in how her feelings affected her spiritual side, which is real important to her. The novel is about accepting yourself and finding your own autonomy, even if who you are is forbidden by the world or acceptable society. It's about refusing to be a keg in a machine or refusing to be a cuck. Both characters start off as cucks, especially the male lead, but they can't accept being cucks and are miserable as cucks. If they accepted themselves as cucks like the Brent Spiner clone does, the readers would not want to read about them. People who like being cucks get no respect from readers. So the Brent Spiner clone who likes being Laurie's cuck is a very unattractive character, though he'd make a good villain. The real Brent Spiner is heroic and unselfish and a lot like my lead. So I give my two leads a bit of spunk, but it starts off small and then it grows. Any successful writer knows that attractive leads are doers, not cucks. If you want your story to flop, make your leads cucks and social justice warriors who don't have a thought of their own. The big mistake I made with the ending that I created in 2008 was that I had God rescue them and give them their happy ending. For this reason the ending didn't work, and I suspect Spielberg, when he made his movie, didn't follow my ending completely because he knew how to make it work. In my new version, my leads create the happy ending through their own actions and decisions. Though God helps them out, the final outcome is dependent on their own actions and decisions and not on what God does for them, which is a much more satisfying ending. They work out what God has done with them on the inside. There's a lot of Bible prophecy in this novel, but the main plot's a romance, and there's a romance subplot too. It's not your typical romance in that my romantic leads are stuck on tribulation earth and play a role in leading the Jewish nation to the Messiah Jesus. I have combined a love story with a mainstream story that depicts tribulation earth. So the story has some darkness in it, more so than your typical romance novel. I guess it would be considered mainstream or a single title, a lot like the Thornbirds, except my leads are mostly men. Most women don't write male leads well. Their portrayals read like a shadow man without a soul. It's like reading about a man going through the motions of manliness, which is how Laurie portrays her men in her sorry television and movie productions, and her women too. She's a terrible writer. But we don't feel the man's soul in the process. So mostly when a woman the typical woman writes a male point of view, we don't really understand the man's soul because the woman doesn't understand his soul. Female writers mess up when they get into how a man feels, and that's because most men don't divulge their deepest feelings easily. It's too deep and sensitive for them. So unless a woman is a bit of a man herself, like me, I'm King David, she really can't understand what's really going on with the man. Being half King David helps. Now, with white males being castigated by acceptable society thanks to bitch Laurie McBride, it's even worse. The men are growing up ashamed of their manliness. This is really bad and not good for the world. This book has concentration camps, decapitations, rape, because this is what's going to happen during the tribulation. As a movie, it would probably be rated PG-13 or R. I can't get around this. If I'm going to be true to the Bible, I have to portray the tribulation accurately, but I don't want the book to be depressing, so the love story is the main story. There's a lot of misunderstandings about manliness, too, that I hope to correct. But being half King David, I think I can pull it off. I can even do it so that women will like to read a book from a man's point of view as a lover, because the women are going to be rooting for these men. A good woman respects a good man. And I'm just going to say that one thing, I've been watching Hallmark movies over and over, and I'm just telling you, every time I watch a movie, I'm thinking they could never make a love story about Brent Spiner and Laurie McBride. It wouldn't work because if it was made honestly, people would see that Brent and Laurie are utterly incompatible. Every good romance, you got to portray the leads as soulmates, and Brent and Laurie are about as incompatible as night and day.